Welcome to the Vikings Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Hoikkala, and I'm downtown in Hopkins, Minnesota in the Skoll Marketing Studios. And thank you, Ben and Hunter, for helping me get set up in these amazing studios. And I just appreciate it so much. And with the Vikings Playbook, Sunday starts here. We try to always bring on different guests to give you a different point of view, but today is a special episode of the Vikings Playbook. And today I have with me many of you Vikings fans. You know him as the legend in purple and gold. You know him as the spin doctor. I have with me today no other than Chuck Foreman. Chuck, how are we today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's good for you to come over.
And, I just want to, before we get into this,
Right.
Many Minnesota Vikings fans, like I said, they know about you being the legend
Right.
with the Minnesota Vikings. So just some quick accolades and honors just to go over this. 5 Pro Bowl selections.
Right.
And all consecutive
Right.
from 73 to 77. You were the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
2-time first-time All-Pro selections in 75-76. 2-time second-team All-Pros. You were the UPI NFC Offensive Player of the Year in 1976.
And twice.
Twice.
Right.
Okay. NFL receptions leader, which we'll talk about how crazy this is. But in 1975, you were the receptions leader in the NFL.
Right.
Which at your position, we'll talk about how wild that is. And then you also appeared in 3 Super Bowls. You're a member of the Vikings Ring of Honor, and you were also named to the 50 Greatest Vikings list in 2010, and you're an anniversary Vikings team member of the 25th and the 40th anniversary teams. And when you retired, you also held the Vikings franchise record for rushing yards, 5,879. You're tied with the team record at that time with 52 rushing touchdowns. And that's not even mentioning your receiving touchdowns with 23.
Right.
Which is almost more impressive than your rushing, just for the position that you played.
Right.
So this is exciting stuff. So I talked to you before we went live on the show. You're my dad's favorite Minnesota Viking player of all time. And he's been a fan for 60 years, so he's geeking just as much as I am getting to do this interview with you. But what I want to talk to you about today is not a whole lot of Minnesota Vikings fans. You may know of Chuck Foreman, of being a legendary Minnesota Vikings player, but not many of those individuals, maybe even fans of the University of Miami, may not know about your story and how unlikely your story is as far as you even being recruited by the University of Miami and getting to the Minnesota Vikings. This is just, and the more research that I've done on you, Chuck, it's so exciting and got me even more excited to do this interview with you, just because I think that I don't know if I've ever heard of a different story like this where a player had as much pure athletic talent as you did. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't know about. So we're going to get into this. So before the world knew you as Chuck Foreman, the Minnesota Vikings legend, you attended Frederick High School in Maryland.
Right.
You played basketball and track.
Yep.
And you set records. And I have the discus, the shot put, and hurdles as well, right? Is that right?
Well, I didn't do much discus and not much shot put. Now, that's my brother.
Okay.
My brother has all those records.
Okay.
Okay, I was a hurdler, high and low hurdler and sprinter. And so I won the state championship in Maryland twice in both. In my sophomore and my junior year, and I didn't play my senior year. I couldn't participate in track my senior year.
Now you were also really good in basketball as well, right?
Exactly. I had more basketball offers than I did football. So,
and you had tri-state honors in football as a junior and senior. Now, with all this athleticism in different sports, I was a multi-sport athlete too, but not on the level of Chuck Foreman. But was there ever a world where you thought, maybe I'm going to play a different sport in college and pursue basketball or even track?
Well, I think back in my time anyway, in my era, growing up, whatever, if it was football season, you played football. Basketball, you played basketball. In the spring, you either played baseball or ran track. I chose track. And that was how it went. And so I knew, I had some my high school coaches were all just fantastic. And, I got blessed to be coached by, Coach Craven in football, Coach Comer in football, basketball coach Homer Brooks, track coach Harold Moser, and Jack Griffith, who was the head women's track coach, I think in the 68 Olympics? Because we had two girls from our hometown, Tammy Davis and Debbie Thompson, that were a part of the Olympic team. So I came from a place where, there was a lot of success as far as people coming through my community and going on and doing some good things. And so, I don't know, I just, whatever it was, like I wanted to be the best at it. So, and where we used to play all the time, a place called Malnix Park. I mean, I always got to play games against the older dudes who beat me up and threw me around and all that, but I just never quit. And so I had guys that I grew up with that they don't probably know it, but, they helped me along the way.
Now, this is crazy to me. When I spoke to you and you mentioned this, now, your first football practice in high school,
right?
When they took a look at Chuck Foreman, were they saying, you know what, this guy would be a heck of a defensive lineman? What exactly was that conversation? How did you end up? Because you played on the defensive line.
Right.
You played a little bit of tackle, a little bit of end.
Right.
And then a little bit of tight end as well?
Yeah, I played tight end was my main position at the time. And as far as defense goes, they had me at defensive end, but I was so, you had to have a little bit more. I was real aggressive. So I would get out of position at times, and then they moved me inside to defensive tackle where I excelled. Where I grew up, of course, guys back in those days weren't as big as they are now, but we had some big guys, don't misunderstand me, but we had so many good athletes that you had to play where your coach told you to play. It was like you had no choice. So that's what happened, and then I just said, okay. My father would tell me, I'd go home and say, hey, Dad, they moving me. They want me to play. He said, well, go and be the best at it. And don't come back and ask me any more questions about it. That's the way my father approached it. And so that's what I did. We had, the competition was there. Me and my makeup and my personality, I always wanted to be the best, so I worked hard at it.
Now, obviously, you were an outstanding athlete, being able to play multiple sports and play multiple positions, both sides of the ball in football. But how did playing different positions in high school prepare you for the college game, getting recruited, and how did that teach you about like the different physicality that you played with back in those days?
Well, I think for me anyway, with the way I was coached coming up, I was a football player. It didn't matter where I was going to play. I just knew I was going to be the best at it because I was going to put the work in to do that. And so I think with that attitude and the kind of people that I had coaching me, to tell me, hey, you're a football player. Don't just be a tight end. Don't just be a defensive tackle. Be all you can be. And so with the people we had on our team coming up, you had to, had to play where the coach told you to play. So it was no use crying about it. You just went on, okay, if this is where I'm going to be the best at it. And so that's what I used to do.
Now, for college, when you're being recruited for college, you played different positions.
Right.
And what colleges were interested and what position did they want you to play when you were first being recruited?
Okay, here's the way it went with me being recruited. I got letters from pretty much everywhere, but there was Syracuse that I was seriously considering. There was West Virginia. I was considering Maryland, Penn State. By the way, Joe Paterno said I wasn't Penn State material. And my response to him as an 18-year-old was me and the guy named Ronnie Proctor in there meeting with Coach Paterno. And we had watched Penn State. He showed us Penn State film and stuff like that. And at the end of the thing, and he watched our film too, then at the end he came out and said, you know, you guys are some good football players, but I don't think you were Penn State material. But we had already watched Penn State. And me and my friend, we just busted out laughing. And we said, you mean to tell me we can't play with that crap you got there? Because that's what I thought, big, slow dudes that were big. In those days, it wasn't that many, how can I put it? They didn't have that many great athletes. They were just big and slow. Mm-hmm. And I think they had just recruited Lydell Mitchell and Franco Harris. Then they had a guy by the name of John Capoletti, who was a running back for him. I think he played 1 or 2 years with the Rams. But my attitude was like we just laughed. I just laughed because I knew. When I saw the film of Penn State up close like that and I watched those guys play, I'm like, none of them could play with me. Not one.
And we'll talk about this, but not just Joe Paterno. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about other coaches, especially at the U of Miami.
Right.
At the U, it's not the first coach that maybe doubted your set of skills.
Right.
And we'll get into that. Now, when the University of Miami started to recruit you,
right.
You were recruited at what position? What position did they initially want you
defensive tackle and tight end.
Okay, so that's the position that they wanted you to play.
Well, yeah, but you see, Miami came in late. I mean, when they recruited me, it was only because they were watching film of another guy they were recruiting from a place called Bel Air High School in Baltimore. They were recruiting this guy that was a offensive tackle, defensive tackle or something like that. And, of course, I was going up against this guy during that game. And, well, let's put it this way. Miami stopped recruiting him after that. So I had really good games against him. And that's how Miami.
So with that, tell me a little bit about, when you came to that school, you were the third African-American player at the University of Miami. Ray Bellamy was the first, and then Tom Sullivan.
Right.
Now,
and then me and Burgess Owens came in.
Absolutely. So what was that like on campus, and what do you remember about stepping onto the campus for the first time?
Being on campus the first time was, it was an international town, an international school, so we had a lot of people from all over the world there. So we really didn't even experience a whole lot of racial issues. I mean, there was some, no question about it, but we were able to navigate that. And then we had back in those days, we had a black student union. When I say a black student group, and so. They were, with those guys, they were there, and so. But I tried to just navigate the way through Miami the way my parents, taught me to do, and I handled everything individually. I didn't assume anything about anybody. I just treated people with respect, and in turn, they did that with me. But my whole experience in Miami, the city of Miami. Now, I used to go over with a place called Overtown and then Liberty City. By the way, and different other areas of Miami. Now, if Miami had just got all the great athletes out of the city of Miami, they probably would have won 10, 12 national championships by now. Because when I got down there and I just went to high school games, and I used to see these guys, and I'm like, wow, they were unbelievable. But my experience at Miami, I had a great experience there, and I think most of it had to do, like I said, we had a few issues here, but we were able to navigate it and all that. And the president of the school, Dr. Henry King Stanford, when I first got there, even though I was going to play football, I got to meet him, my parents and me, and he reassured my parents that he had things in place if there was an issue or if I needed to connect. There was communities around that participated in it because it was at that time integration was just starting, and so. I think Miami did a good job, in my opinion, of putting things in place so we would be able to function normally down there. And like I said, the president of the school was always, his door was always open. If I needed something or wanted something, if I had an issue, Dr. Stanford would be there to help guide me and the rest of us through any problem we may have. And he, to me, was one of the better. I can't believe most guys that go to college have an open door to walk into the president of the school and sit down and have a conversation with him anytime you wanted to.
Right.
And he was more like an Indiana Jones type guy. Every year he'd be going someplace to explore something or to, he was just that type of person. And just when you got into his office after every year, I used to look forward to coming over there to see what he'd do in the Middle East or what he did in Africa. But you can sit there and he had pictures and he had all that and he'd explain it to you and talk to you about it. But I think that was a major part of my college experience, to have a relationship like that. And then the coaches, of course, they were pretty good guys, and but like I say, what I'm trying to say too is that I was being recruited by Miami last. They didn't know much about me as an athlete. They saw I was a good football player, no doubt. Mm-hmm. But that's why they came and recruited me. But as far as my basketball, my track, and all that other stuff, and plus they didn't know my makeup mentally and physically, and how I thought, and I think one of the strongest things I had going for me is my work ethic, my commitment to being all that I can be, and to have the kind of coaching I had coming up in high school, the best of all. My track coach was, like I said, the Olympic women's head track coach, Jack Griffin, and he pushed and pushed and pushed, and probably I went home one day and I said to my father, because my father knew Jack, and I said, Dad, but I had him as a teacher when I was in 8th and 9th grade. And he would I thought he was picking on me, to be quite honest with you, but he wasn't. He was pushing me because he saw something special. And he told me that when I got to high school. Because I called my father and I said, Dad, you need to go talk to this guy. Go beat him up or something. So.
Now, when you got to college,
right.
did you have conversations with Ray Bellamy and Tom Sullivan when you got there? Because when Ray Bellamy got there, this was kind of a time period going through different changes, especially, where we talked, Black History Month. Here's some history for you, because Ray Bellamy going in here, he was actually the first black player to receive a scholarship from a major college in the Southeast during these times.
That's right.
He received, different, death threats, racial hostility that he had to go through for, so he came in, he signed in December of 66.
Right.
So, a couple of years have passed.
Right.
Now, 1968, Tom Sullivan comes in, and in 69, you come in.
Right.
And then before we get to this question, so something changed during this time, because Ray Bellamy eventually became and was elected as the student body president at the University of Miami. So,
that's right.
Did you guys have these conversations, and what kind of change, like drastic changes socially?
Well, I think, as I said, the University of Miami was an international school. We had people from all over the world. Then a lot of people were from up north, and they were wealthy. Because the University of Miami is like, if you didn't have money, you weren't going to Miami unless you had some type of scholarship or something like that. But most of the other people there, they were well off. We had people from all over the world, but I think one of the things about the U, is that everybody, from the people that went to school there, Ray and me, and so we all helped Ray along the way. And Ray not only was a great football player, a very smart guy, and unfortunately for Ray, he was in a car accident.
Right.
And he broke his femur, I think, up here.
And that happened in 1970, right?
70, yeah. And he was on. And if that had not happened, he would have probably been the first player off the board in the NFL draft. That's how good he was as a receiver. About 6'4", about 220, could run like the wind, great athlete. And that was heartbreaking. But he ended up playing, I think, in Canada and maybe in the NFL 1 or 2 years anyway. But he, as far as at our time at Miami, he set the standard. He was smart. He worked hard. We studied he made sure we all studied together at the dorm, because there was the football dormitory, and we were in what we called the 960 dorm, where it was a high rise. It was brand new, so they allowed me and Burgess. Burgess was my first roommate, but they allowed us to stay. Now Sully stayed over in the football dorm, and Ray was up. But anyway, we got a chance to. But Ray kind of showed us the way. Made sure we went to class every day. Mm-hmm. We made sure we were dressed appropriately every day. Ray was that kind of guy, to help show us the way and to help us understand our responsibility. And so my parents told me and had that conversation with me going down to Miami. But the good thing is Ray was there first. He grew up in Florida, and his family used to work on, out there in the fields and stuff, picking fruits and stuff like that, all that kind of thing. So he grew up in a different environment than me. But the good thing is he had great work ethic. He was smart, and he showed us the way, and we all were pretty tight. So, we studied together, we did everything together. So, so that was a good thing. And then, after I think my sophomore year, I'm going into my junior year, the first thing I couldn't understand is why Miami, with all the great athletes right in the city, because we used to go to high school football games, and I'm like, man, some of these teams might be better than our freshman team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, Miami is a once you get there and you've been there, it's got a different vibe to it. The people, the city itself, it's unique. And so that experience there was real special.
Now, when the University of Miami gets you on the field, coaches start looking at you. You were brought in to play defensive line. Right. You were asked to play tight end. That's what they recruited you for. But then at some point during your freshman year, you started playing some cornerback, right?
I played no, I went there. I went to as a freshman. Back then, you played freshman football.
Sure.
And you had a freshman team, then you had a varsity team. So I played the freshman football. So like I said, I came there as a tight end defensive tackle. But before all that, we had to run 40-yard dashes. Mm-hmm. They didn't know much about. Like I said, I came in as a recruit, late. So I really don't think they understood what I could do. So when we had 40-yard timing, we had this guy from Ohio, big, tall, wide receiver, like this nice-looking dude. He was like, he could have went to Hollywood and been a movie star. His name was Bruce Bishop. Now, he was the fastest guy supposedly on the team.
But you're a track star, coming in.
Didn't nobody know what about me as far as that track. I mean, state champion twice in the hurdles. Mm-hmm. So I remember Jack Griffin always used to say to me, well, if you want to know how good you are, don't run against the backup or the guy that comes in. Go find the guy that normally wins.
Fastest guy.
So when they called 40-yard sprints, I jumped up there with him. And so one of the things I always had going for me was I was quick out of the blocks. Now, I got out of the blocks quick on him, and I got in the lead, and I beat him by like a step or two. You know what I mean? But then after that, that's when coach, his name was Vester Newcomb, came over to me and says, hey, I got an idea. I said, well, what's that? Tomorrow I'm going to try you at running back as a freshman, right?
Yep.
Now, mind you, I had no experience, none of that stuff. Most of the guys came in, they all played running back all their life and stuff like that. And so I broke all the records down there as a freshman. I did have a problem with holding because I used to hold the ball out and I'd fumble a little bit. And then my sophomore year, I went out and I put the ball on the ground a little bit. And then Coach Kersey moved me they moved me to cornerback.
Yep.
Right.
So I see that on your side. And that's probably why I'm not seeing a whole lot of your running stats from your freshman year, because of that freshman team.
Yeah,
that's kind of think of it like varsity JV type thing.
Yeah, it wasn't like it is now, where
Sure.
you get there as a freshman, you play. But we had freshman football, and then you had varsity football. So we had our own schedule. And so I don't know. And then they moved me to a wide receiver because I could catch the ball and
Right.
And they didn't know that I could get away from people the way I could, And so my sophomore year, I got that experience as running back, but I was inexperienced at it, but I was pretty good at it. And then they fired our head coach, Charlie Tate. And then Frank Kersey comes in, and he's from Tampa and University of Tampa, and then he comes in, I'm playing running back, then he's moving people around and stuff like that. And then one day he came to me, I don't know, after my junior year or something, anywhere in there.
Because he came in
And he says, I'm going to move you to wide receiver. You won't play running back as a pro. You're going to be a great wide receiver, some stuff like that. And in my mind, and I was thinking, this dude don't know me.
So Joe Paterno,
Right.
thinks that, hey, you're not Penn State
material, right?
And then Fran Cersei comes in,
right,
and he tells you you're never going to be
a running
back
right.
at the next level,
right? But he knew I was going to play, but he said not a running back, and I'm like, I'm just sitting there thinking, and my thinking at the time was like, well, I'm going to do what he says I'm going to do, but I'm going to go over here and be the best wide receiver they got, because that's just my makeup. But I'm thinking to him, and then the guy that he had replacing me, I'm looking at him, and I'm like, you got to be joking. This is my thinking. I wasn't expressing it, but that was what I was thinking. But I also knew, didn't matter where they put me, I knew I was going to be the best out there. Now, it might sound cocky or whatever, but that's not what it was. It was confident in my abilities, and I knew I had that. And then, they moved me to receiver, and I came back and played the running back to my senior year. And then, made All-American and all that, even with all those different changes and things like that. First team All-American on some places. And then I go on to the All-Star games, right? And I was MVP in every one of them.
It is crazy because, in
right.
71,
right.
You actually, you ran for 951
right.
yards and 10 touchdowns.
Back in those days.
And at this time, they only played 11 games.
Right.
Those are really good stats. When we're only talking about 11 games. And you're not even primarily playing that.
No,
you're
I'm not really playing that much. And then you got my offensive line probably averaged 230 pounds. They weren't that. They were tough guys and all, but, it was a different time, different era, with different stats meant something different then. It's like even when I came to the NFL, if you had 1,000 yards, you were considered elite.
You were the man. Yeah.
You were the guy. That was the place everybody wanted to get to. But I think what the game is changed, and people get a misunderstanding when they see a guy that played in my era and they compare it to the stats of these guys. That's not fair, because the whole concept of football was different. It was run. Everybody at first, the most what I want to say popular offense at the time was the wishbone. Texas was running it, Oklahoma was running it, and killing people with it, and so everybody wanted to try to run the wishbone.
And
nobody was throwing.
Doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, the defenses
Right.
are also all lined up to try to stop the run.
Exactly.
So it makes it more difficult to even run the ball.
Yeah, and people didn't throw the ball back a lot back then. So you can't compare the times and the eras to the times of today, because it's like it's you can't do it.
So, I want to ask you about the nickname. So when you came in, again, Tom Sullivan's already there. You guys end up sharing the backfield and become the Gold Dust Twins.
Right.
So where did that nickname come from, and when do you remember the first time you started hearing it?
I just started hearing. I don't know who we played, and both him and I were scoring touchdowns, and I guess somebody said the gold. One of the writers, I think it was a guy named Luther Evans, I think his name was. I don't know if it was him or not, but the Gold Dust Twins came out in the Miami Herald, is what they called us, and I think that's because we were scoring touchdowns on a pretty good clip, and that stood there for a while, and that was my, I don't know. Miami was just a great experience for me.
And stat-wise,
Right.
you talked about being a wide receiver, and again, everyone's stacking up on the run.
Right.
But your senior season, that's really when you stood out, as far as how many catches you were receiving as a Miami, running back.
Right.
Also playing some wide receiver.
Right.
And so then we started getting closer to the NFL draft.
Right.
What was that process like leading up to the draft back then? And
I'm going to tell you something. I really didn't think about the NFL or anything till after my junior year, and let me tell you how. Anyway, I get a phone call one day, and I'm not going to mention his name, but it's I'll tell you his name. His name is Ivory Black. He was from this place called National Sports.
Okay.
And he calls me up and he says, Chuck, my name is Ivory Black, and I'm one of the nicest guys I've ever met, by the way. And he says, I think I can get you to be drafted number one, as the number one draft choice someplace. I'm like, what?
So was he a sports agent then?
He was an agent.
Okay. Yep.
Right.
That sounds right.
Okay, so that's my first experience right there. I'm like, this guy's calling me, and then I didn't even know I was on the rated as high as, I wasn't even thinking about being rated as a high draft choice. It wasn't even in my orbit. I wasn't even thinking in those terms, because I was just thinking about getting through college, right? But anyway, he says, well, I'm in town and I'd like to meet with you. And I'm like, wait a minute, I can't do that. I'm a junior and he's an agent, and I might get into trouble. You know what I mean? 'Cause back in those days. So I told him, well, I appreciate the phone call, but I can't do that. So he was respectful and said, okay, thank you. We just wanted to let you know we're out here and just keep playing hard, and you'll do some good things at the next level. And that was the first time I ever knew that I was considered an NFL, draft consideration. But then after that, it seemed like the floodgates opened with people calling and all that stuff. And I'm like, man, I can't do this. So it was like I had to cut all that off, change my phone number and all that because, I didn't want to be tempted.
Sure. when NFL teams, and we're getting into the draft, and as they start selecting players,
Right.
were there other teams before you were picked at number 12 by the Vikings? Were there
Right.
other teams that were trying to come in saying that, hey, we're looking at drafting you or having you play this position?
Well, back in those days, they had I think there was a thing called Bledsoe or some scouting combine that would scout all the players for the teams and send out all the information to the different teams about each player.
Sure.
I think that's how it went back then. And so as far as I'm concerned, I never really had any personal contact with any particular team. I mean, but like at the All-Star games, the scouts was down there, and a lot of the head coaches were down there. Bud Grant was at the Senior Bowl. I remember that because I remember being down there. And one of my friends, Wally Chambers, God rest his soul, he came over to me. He says, "Hey, you notice that guy over there that keeps walking next to you and looking at you and kind of checking you out and seeing, I'm like, man, I don't know, who's that?" He says, well, he says, I don't know, but, and then one of the guys came over and said, hey, man, that's Bud Grant over there. Okay, so that was Bud.
Yep.
Checking it at the Senior Bowl. And that was the only, I didn't know whether he was interested in drafting me, but he was kind of sizing me up and stuff like that. And so that was at the practices and things, so... I didn't know anything about anybody being interested. Somebody said the Saints at one time, and I'm like, man, I'm glad that I didn't go there. But, it ended up me going to the Vikings, which was the best thing that happened to me in that time, especially at that time, because, the NFL was still just bringing in black players, to be quite honest with you. Mm-hmm. Or... I don't want to say just started, but it was not, wasn't not as dominant back then. So Bud Grant's checking you out,
right? And he's probably trying to figure out, this guy's a heck of an athlete. Mm-hmm. He's played all these different positions,
right?
And what he's probably seeing is a ball of clay, because he can see all these different things that you can do that really isn't being done in the game at this time. So what was that initial conversation with you and Bud Grant as far as what position he saw for you? Because, what Bud had in mind for you, he ends up telling you that you're going to be the best, but you're not going to be recognized as the best.
Okay, when I first got drafted, my first contact with Jim Finks and Bud Grant, when I came up here from my meeting with them after the draft, the first thing they said is, well, where do you want to play? What position you want to play? Just tell us which one you want to play and we'll put you there. I'm like, oh, okay. But, I had those choices. I could play corner. I could play receiver.
Because they knew you had that athleticism.
They knew I had that kind of ability. And I was really inexperienced at all of them. Mm-hmm. I played defensive tackle, tight end. I'm like, even in college, I was still adapting to learning how to play wide receiver, running back, and corner. I didn't get a chance to stay at any one of them long enough to be experienced to come into the league. The only time I know when I got to these All-Star games, we had all these great players, Greg Pruitt, Johnny Rodgers, you name them, Sam Cunningham, and they were the big guys from USC and Johnny Musso from Alabama and all these guys. And I'm Chuck Foreman from Miami of Florida, and so I'm at practice and all these guys, they were big time first team, national champions and all that stuff. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, so I'm here with all these guys. And I was at practice a couple times, went to practice, and I'm practicing with these guys. And, after the first 2 or 3 practices, I'm saying to myself, they can't play with me. You know what I mean? And then I took it to a whole different level because I was kind of like holding back what I could do at practice somewhat.
So you still haven't told Bud hey, this is where I want to play yet?
No, I didn't tell him that yet. But I'm just kind of, like I said, at the practices and
feeling it out.
I'm kind of okay. I was just kind of cruising, and then I turned it up. And okay, now I'm gonna show you guys what I can do. And then that's when as far as a running back goes, every one of those games I excelled. And that's when Bud knew because they had I don't know. I just decided when he said that, I said, well, let me play running back, because I was a fan of Leroy Kelly. Of course, Jim Brown was the guy. I remember watching as a kid Lenny Moore. I'm forgiving you, but I was this little dude then. Lenny Moore, Tom Manny, and Bobby Mitchell. Now, to all those guys, I wanted to be like. The reason being is they could do everything. Mm-hmm. They could run the ball, they could catch the ball, they can do everything. And I wanted to be a football player. And I thought to be a football player, you had to do all those things. And so I worked at it, and then I just started doing some different things, catching the ball with one hand, not with two, and all these kind of different things. And I mean, in practice and stuff, when I was down at the U, we used to work out every day, me and the guys, and that's how it all developed.
But this is a scary thing for a defensive player.
Right.
Because you're 6'2".
Right.
You're a bigger, taller guy.
Mm-hmm.
You're put together.
Right.
To the point to where you were even recruited initially to play tight end defense. These are big players.
Right.
So now you're putting the ball in somebody that can also play that position's hands.
Right.
And they're running at you full force, and they can move the way that you move.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a huge problem for a defensive player that's thinking, I got to make a career decision to try to take this guy down.
Right.
Now, a lot of people don't know this, but when you take a look at it, you talk about playing running back, but you play fullback.
Right.
With the Minnesota Vikings.
Right.
And that's a new position again. We're making a position
that kind of, the fullback at the time was considered a blocking back and just a short yardage dude. That's how
and you changed all of that.
And then I was when I came in from All-Star games and stuff like that, and then I go to the meeting and stuff to come to one practice, and then next day they come in and tell me, we're going to move you to fullback. I'm really teed off. I'm like, what the heck you mean fullback? I'm not going to be blocking. I was pouting for 2-3 days. And then Oscar Reed and Clinton Jones came to me in my room. Mm-hmm. I think Bud might have sent them up there or something like that. And said to me, hey, rookie, we don't, the fullback here is not like it is normal. The fullback plays are the best plays, for our offense, and you're going to be featured in them. And then you're going to catch the ball too. I'm like, yeah, right. He says, listen, stop pouting. This is Oscar. And Oscar was just a real laid-back guy. And then Bill Brown, came and said something to me, and Dave Osborne was always there to help guide me and stuff like that. But to convince me that the fullback position in the Minnesota Viking offense was special, because it's where the strongest running part of our running game. And they were right. And then they incorporated that with my pass catching. They created some type of offense, whereas we utilized my ability to get out and get one-on-one on people, and my ability to catch the ball. And to, first of all, I could, get rid of anybody I wanted to. As far as one-on-one, it was I'm going to win that battle.
And maybe you have different feelings about this, because it seemed like, for almost your entire football career, you've been asked to change and go to different positions. But,
Right.
Maybe that hardened your ability to be able to adapt. I mean, for a lot of players, they maybe play one or two different positions. That way they can master and be the best. But you were able to so quickly adapt to these different positions. And you're right. I mean, and they were right. The way that they used the fullback and used you was different at the time.
Right. And so most of the guys you see, people don't really know that I played the fullback position. They see me the way
running back, right?
Running back. No, man. I changed the way that a fullback is used.
Absolutely.
And nobody's done it like that. And so, but my whole attitude as far as football goes is no matter what position you put me in, I'm going to make the necessary changes to be the best at it. And that's why, when I got moved and these coaches would say something to me underneath, I just because Jack Griffin, I never forget him, and Coach Comer and Craven, they always used to sit me down and say, hey, listen, you got some great talent. Just believe in yourself and all you can do. And all you do and put the work in, there's nothing you can't accomplish. And I always held on to that because I had so much respect for it. And then especially Jack Griffin, but he was just pounded in me. Because even when we were running track, right? He would come in and depending on who we were running against that day, and he'd come in, he'd have all those guys' times. He says, but you're going to beat them. I'm like, well, if they faster than me, how am I going to beat them? He says, because your form is going to beat him. And so I was wondering why he would keep me out hours after everybody else was gone at track practice. And I was just totally teed off that I had to make that. He said, do you want to be on the track team? I said, yeah. Well, this is what you're going to have to do for me. I'd stay after school and after practice, after track practice. He'd stay out there with me. And we'd go over there, and I'd go over those hurdles and I'd go over those hurdles until, it got to be where when I came over that hurdle, I was just skimming the hurdle. And when my rear leg came back and snapped out, and I was making up time like that, and in between the hurdles, I'm like, wow. And I'd just go skimming over those hurdles. But the guys that were faster, they didn't have the form. I went all the time. So you put the work in. That's where I'm saying you put the work in. And I got a lot of that from all my coaches in high school and took it on to college. And so that's what separated me. And so when coaches used to tell me, I'm like, this guy don't really know me. Simple as that.
So you faced so much. And we talked about your nickname in college. Now you're the Gold Dust Twins.
Right.
You go to the NFL, and now you start hearing, and they're seeing the different moves that you're putting on these defenders. Right. And now the nickname, the Spin Doctor, comes out. Where did that come from? When did you start hearing that nickname?
Well, I can tell you where I got that from. Back in the day, Earl of Pearl Monroe used to play with the Baltimore Bullets. That's what, not the Washington Wizards, which they are now. And he was somebody when we played basketball in high school. We want to be like Earl the Pearl, so he had this spin move when he come up and he dribble the ball and do that spin and jump up and make that jumper. That's what we used to all emulate in basketball.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, and I used to do it all the time in basketball, right? And so I guess my rookie year, we were playing the Houston Oilers. I do remember the first time I ever tried it because I'm like, everybody's telling you don't want to do this kind of stuff up here at this level.
Sure.
But I saw some space over to the right, and who was the linebacker? What was his name? Anyway, if I can think of his name. But anyway, I got one-on-one with him, and I wanted, and I saw space to the right, and I'm like, okay, now how am I going to get rid of this dude? So I gave him a little move to the left, and then I spun back behind him. I got open space, and I'm like, wow, okay. That's the first time I ever did it, and but you got to be careful when you do that thing because you can spin it right into a guy, and I did that one time with Wally Chambers.
Paid for it?
Yeah, I paid for it. Yeah, but he knew what I did because he used to come to Miami. And we used to work. He used to come stay. We used to work out every day together and over at Lee Park in Miami, and he knew all the stuff I would do, And so like when I did that spin thing up here in Metropolitan Stadium, and I just felt, it hurt a little bit, right? And I'm like, dang. And then I look up, and I see this big dude, number 60, smiling at me. He was helping me up, and that big, deep voice was like, because he knew what was coming. He just stayed there. He let me do the thing, but he didn't go for the thing.
Oh, yeah?
No, he didn't, because in fact, I was shocked that he was out there in the first place. And I really didn't even recognize it was Wally. But when I went to do that thing, and he was there.
And I bet in that day, you started doing the spin moves that known as the spin doctor. Just like with Earl the Pearl,
right?
There are people that wanted to do that move, and you see that today. So I'm sure, I can only imagine how popular it was at the time, even just other people trying to use your moves in the game. And
well, I'm gonna tell you one thing about that thing too. This is not something you do all the time. Because see, when I was doing it to get to a open space that I knew I could get to. A lot of guys just do it just like in the middle of a whole group of people, and that ain't smart.
Right.
But whenever I did it, I was going to open space. And so it was good for me because I kind of understood that. Because, a couple of times, one or two times I did it, it hurt a little bit. And so you kind of learn when to and when not to. And I was able to do that.
And it's really just such an iconic move. Even today, I'll let you know, because, even as a little kid, bringing my 4-year-old for the first time to meet you at a signing event,
right,
and telling him about you and all the different stats. My son and I, we play football every day. We go downstairs in the basement, and after meeting you and seeing all that, what he likes to do is he likes to put me in the spin cycle.
Right.
After meeting you, he was so proud of it. But, you're still impacting people at even just a young age with the moves that you were doing back in the 70s. And it's just incredible. Now, we talked about, today was really about telling your unconventional story of even reaching, college and the NFL and playing so many different positions, and then also facing, being the third African-American player at the University of Miami, facing racial, social challenges to overcome at the same time. And you also, you played in 3 Super Bowls, which, a lot of players don't even get to play in one. But you played alongside greats like Fran Tarkenton, Jim Marshall, Alan Page, Carl Eller, Paul Krause, Mick Tingeloff. That's great. That lineup alone is incredible.
Hey, check this out. And all those guys you mentioned, I was in junior high school when when the Vikings had all those great players on the team. And I got to play with them. So just think of that.
And everyone dreams of playing with.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
People
and
they
then
looked
after
up
all
to.
those years, those guys were like, especially when they became the Purple People Eaters back then.
Absolutely.
And stuff like that. And I must have been in.
Was Larson
I
still
think
there?
I was in 10th grade when it was real big time.
Yeah.
For those guys. 10th grade I was. Yeah, Gary Larson was the big defensive tackle that held everybody down. And Allen was the. It was the Purple People Eaters. They were the best of the best. And then, I got drafted, and then I came in there as a rookie, and all those guys are still there. Yeah, and older, of course, but, I'm like, wow. I remember coming out of the huddle the first time in practice, and I'm looking across the, line, and I'm seeing Jim Marshall, Alan Page, Gary Larson, Carl Eller, lining up, and all the other guys over there. Of course, the Purple People Eaters were the big name, and I was like, they hiked the ball, right? And I was still standing there looking at those dudes. Yeah, I was mesmerized by that. Yeah.
But how many of them were also saying, I got to play with Chuck Foreman?
Well, you know, a lot of those guys gave me some good, they recognized, how special I was, each and every one of them, and I appreciate that.
In 1974, you were actually third in MVP voting
right.
for the NFL, and you were fourth in MVP voting, beat out by Fran Tarkenton.
Right.
So that's just among all the other accolades. So, I mean, you had 2 years in a row where you were in the top five,
right.
close to the running of even being the NFL MVP.
Right.
So, I mean, those are great names in Minnesota Vikings lore.
Right.
And you're right there.
Yeah, well, yeah, I appreciate that. But, I don't know. I was privileged to play with not only some great football players, but they were just great people. And that's one of the things that I always talk about. You play with a lot of, guys that are great players, mm-hmm. but some of them are just, not on our team, but some guys that I've met, are just total jerks, But I was fortunate enough to play with a team and organization they were first class. There's some things that I didn't like, but all in all, it was a great experience.
Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to play a video that was created by Sports Legends USA, and also School Marketing helped put this video together, and it's fantastic, telling some of the story of you with the Vikings and just how influential you were.
Here we go. The 11th Super Bowl is underway. Garrett on the 11. Up to the 20.
When I came to the realization that game was going to end in a loss, tears in my eyes. I was broken.
I think I see tears coming down the guy's eyes. He's an emotional player. You hate to see anybody, there he is.
That's a job. That's the toughest job Oakland's had today.
I was walking off the field. I was just really upset about that. I was depressed, to be quite honest with you, for a while. I never thought that would happen, and I just wasn't right, But, in time, it all comes together, and you just got to move on.
Chuck was amazing. He was like the first running back, that was a dual threat, catching the ball. Everything about him was great. He could run the ball, breakaway speed. He was just an all-around back.
Just a bruiser, just a attacking fullback.
When I tell people, I met Chuck Foreman, no matter what age, they know who it is. And it's just a respect thing right away. Oh, wow, Chuck Foreman. Yeah.
Didn't realize how good he was till he was gone.
Bury another football myth. Rookies don't impress the hard-boiled professionals. Water boys get more respect. Don't believe it if the rookie's name is Chuck Foreman. In In the Chicago Bears dressing room, defensive back Gary Lyle tried hard to restrain a gulp. "It's the man's acceleration," he said. "I mean, he really turns it on. He really brings it. I don't think we've seen anything like that around here since Gale Sayers, and he was just the best. Foreman put one move on me that was so beautiful I don't want to discuss it." Francis Tarkenton thoughtfully weighed Chuck Foreman's performance against the Bears, deciding on a calmer evaluation. Should the old pro characterize the rookie running back as good or possibly semi-good? The man, Francis disclosed, is phenomenal. "We've got the offense to go with the defense now," Page said after one of Minnesota's 12 regular season victories. "This is the best Viking team I've been on. Chuck Foreman is the reason."
Yes, Fran was the general out on the field, but the game was different then. The passing rules hadn't opened up. You needed something more. You needed the straw that stirred the drink, and that was Chuck Foreman.
Here comes the guy with the double quads on. And the fact that he had this incredible speed, but then he could shake guys back then in the proverbial phone booth, right? Like everybody was chasing this big number 44 down the field. He was a true unicorn for that era.
So mark that one in tribute to Chuck Foreman. The great ball carriers, somehow, some way, they find a way. Chuck Foreman's one of those guys. He just rolls when he's hit, knows where the first down markers are. Watch him this time as he rolls off to the side there. He's a spinner, all right.
When Bud Grant and Jerry Burns came to me and they said, "Okay, this is how we're going to do this. We're going to take this offense, this purple offense, and we're going to do some different things with it." Now, Bud said to me, he says, "Well, you're going to be the best at your position, but you got to understand you're not going to be recognized as the best at your position." Well, why would I do that part then if I'm not going to be recognized for it? Don't make sense to me. Now, well, it made sense after we started doing it because, like, okay, I'm dual threat. Okay, you can catch it, you can run it, but you got to block to do that. You got to pick up blitzes too. Otherwise, you can't be in on third down. There's all kinds of things that they came to me with, but, you know, those two gentlemen way before their time.
I had played against Joe Washington, Walter Payton, Terry Metcalf, Tony Dorsett every day, Franco Harris, O.J. Simpson. But the only time Tom Landry coached me was when Tarkenton and Chuck Foreman were the offense. He said, "You got to watch this guy. This guy has the best moves, and he's a fullback, but he runs routes like a halfback." I think one time I tripped him because he made a move on me that was so brutal. I stuck my leg out and tripped him because I was done, you know. And then Landry said, when he saw me go down, he said, "I told you, you got to watch him."
One of Chuck's standout qualities was his ability to make game-changing plays. Whether it was a crucial third down conversion or a touchdown run, he had a knack for stepping up when it mattered most. In my years of competing against him, I can confidently say that Chuck Foreman was a dominant player that was a trailblazer for the modern running back. His impact on the game, his team, and the fans will be remembered for generations. Ed Too Tall Jones, defensive end, Dallas Cowboys.
Like, he would be so prototypical for the modern era, the current running back, because the game now is played in space and the game is now all about explosive plays on offense. And to have a running back who could turn what looks like a 3-yard play into a 13-yard gain, like that's what he did.
He runs like a back and catches like a receiver. Besides the physical ability, he is an intense football player, and there is no hot dog in him, said Coach Bud Grant.
I think he's been an underrated and underappreciated aspect of that team that made it to 3 Super Bowls. And it's hard to say this with any degree of confidence because we don't know and we won't know, but I have a hard time imagining the Vikings making it to a Super Bowl without someone of his skill set in those years that he was in his prime, and the Vikings coincidentally were among the best teams in all of football.
I mean, he led the NFL in receptions one year, and over the space of 3 or 4 seasons, he had more receptions than any wide receiver in the game.
Having those numbers, I think if fantasy football existed in the 70s, he'd be in, because he was a top 5 guy for how many straight years? 4 straight years? Top 5 guy if the scoring rules that apply to fantasy football that everyone follows today had existed back then. He would have been a bigger star. He would have been the guy that you want to get every year. So I think when you look at some of the contemporaries, I think it's only fair to give Chuck Foreman consideration.
Well, check this out. It's been a long time since I was on the football field, right? And all the people that really recognize, the name and what I used to do and all that, and even the young people, it's like nonstop. And it's a good thing because I'm meeting so many great people, so many great Viking fans. I get to go meet these people, communicate with them, associate with them, hang out with them, break bread with them, talk to them, meet their grandkids, meet their kids. But the fact that my name is still recognizable, and then in a good way. Yeah, I've had a great journey. I mean, I'm still on my journey, don't misunderstand, but the journey's been interesting.
All right, so that video
Right.
highlighted, some of the, stats, accolades in your career. And this year, and they talked about getting you into the Hall of Fame and how you're not in the Hall of Fame. But so this year you were among 52 seniors considered. You advanced to the final 34 of the Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2026, but didn't make the cut with voting. What would a Hall of Fame induction represent for you if it did happen? A highly decorated athlete who didn't take the traditional path to greatness. You're a trailblazer at a major football college as an African-American and playing so many different positions, transforming the way that a running back or a fullback was viewed in the game. What would that mean for you?
Well, being in the Pro Football Hall of Fame would be great. No question about it. But I don't know what their selection process is, and if you try to think about it or wonder how they do it, I think a guy would drive himself crazy. And so, you see, I know I belong in the Football Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
I don't have to have. It's unfortunate. It's in other people's hands. But I'm talking about my time and my era. I can't speak to the players that came before me. I can't speak to the players that came after me. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking during my time. And offensively, there were some as good, but there was none better. And that's how I look at it. And so, the Hall of Fame is certainly a great honor. But if a guy doesn't get in and it really, changes his whole makeup, and I think that's not good and healthy either. So I'm happy to be considered to get to, I think I was one of the 34 that they chose before they chose the last 9 or whatever. Yep. But it is what it is. And, I don't want to blow my own horn or nothing like that, but I know how good I was during my time.
And I will say this, on the voting process.
Right.
I think it's important for the voting body, for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, to look at a person's journey, their entire career,
right,
the impact that they had in the game, and not just stats.
Right.
We had a little bit of controversy with the Pro Football Hall of Fame this year with Bill Belichick. I wrote an article. I write for purpleptsd.com, and I had an article on this as well. Egregious, as far as not being a first-time ballot entry into the Hall of Fame. If anyone embodies a first time, it's
Bill
the greatest
Belichick.
coach of all time,
right?
That leads all those records. Now, going back to you, you also set a lot of these running records, catching records at the time, unheard of. Not even just for a running back,
right,
but for a fullback as well,
right,
to amass 73 receptions in a year and the video highlighted it. You had more receptions than number one wide receivers in all of the league, on top of having a top 1,000 yard plus rushing year. That's how versatile, that's how dynamic you were as a runner and a pass catcher. And I'm looking directly at the camera because if you're not just, if you're part of the Pro Football Hall of Fame voting process, you need to take a look at Chuck Foreman's career as a whole. Yes, it was 8 years. You had a knee injury that, cut it a little bit short. Yes, the 3 Super Bowls, they didn't win, but you went to 3 Super Bowls, and there are players that don't even have one that are in the Hall of Fame.
But there are players that played longer that don't have my stats.
Absolutely.
So that's, in my time, like, for instance, you got, I'm not going to mention names, but a guy gets to like 8 years, and his team say, okay, we're going to back up a little bit, and you can be a third down back or certain situational player. That, and that's what they did for Roger Craig and people like that. And that's what they did with Bill Brown here and Dave Osborne. But when they thought maybe I was not able to carry it like I normally would, I didn't get the opportunity to hang around 2 or 3 extra years. I just got shipped out, cut.
Running backs, fullbacks, in the day that you played, so we're talking O.J. Simpson, Walter Payton,
right,
in the same division as you, Franco Harris, Larry Zonka, Earl Campbell, John Riggins, Floyd Little.
Right.
Those are great names, all in the Hall of Fame. Not all of those players even have the stats that you do,
exactly,
and they're in the Hall of Fame.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. And when I look at that, I'm like, okay, I don't know. And then when Bill Belichick didn't get in this year, I'm like, okay, I'm cool. I don't understand the whole process, and I'm not going to try to. But when Bill Belichick didn't get in on the first ballot, and plus, the ballot, everybody votes, it's a secret. I think they have a secret voting movement, but that should be public.
Well, they did issue a letter, the Pro Football Hall of Fame did, because of the controversy that they had with Bill Belichick this year. And I will say this, and I think this is a great opportunity for us as Vikings fans. So, or University of Miami fans or Chuck Foreman fans in general. Make sure that you distribute this and let's try to get the word out to because I think there's a lot of voters that really, maybe they weren't alive at the time to
That's
see
no
you
doubt
play.
about that now.
So
No
you
doubt.
have some of those voters that really don't truly know Chuck Foreman and as far as the impact that you had in the game. And maybe they just, when they see a profile as far as who's up for the Hall of Fame, they're living in recency bias instead of looking at the impact. Again, I talked about you were number 3, number 4 in MVP voting 2 years consecutively. You were offensive MVP for one of those years and led the league in receiving, which that's a crazy stat alone to be able to lead the NFL in receptions at your position. And on top of it, breaking and tying records for touchdowns. It's crazy. At the time that you played, you had in 3 seasons, you had 51 touchdowns in a 3-year period. And I really think that that's something that you need to look at if you're a Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. And if we're Minnesota Vikings fans, let's get on board. Now, this also brings me to my next question. I know that Skull Marketing, doing a fantastic job, by the way, and Sports Legends USA, making sure to get the word out that, Chuck Foreman needs to be in the Hall of Fame. But what efforts beyond that? Has the Vikings organizations itself made any additional efforts to help promote? Because, again, I think that there's some recency bias, some individuals that maybe just don't know the impact you had in the game. Has there been any efforts by the organization itself to assist with any of that in that process?
No. Not one bit. Everything you see being done is being done by Skull Marketing and a few other individuals that are, helping me get the recognition that I need. The Vikings know. So, no, they haven't been a part of that.
Well, that's the challenge I give to you, Vikings fans. Help me, help Skull Marketing, Sports Legends USA, and, of course, Chuck Foreman. Let's get that word out because, honestly, Chuck Foreman needs to be in the Hall of Fame. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And I think that's something that we can help to do is push the awareness, whether it be the video that was made by Sports Legends USA, just highlighting the disparity and the impact of some of those greats that I mentioned that, you played with them, but you also played better than them at some of those times during those years. And you have better overall stats than those individuals that are already in the Hall of Fame. Now, moving on to the next question that I have for you. This has been a fantastic interview so far. But if you could speak directly to athletes, because, again, you changed the way that running backs, fullbacks were being used and the ability to change positions. We saw Travis Hunter come out of Colorado, go to Jacksonville. He was asked to be, try to play both sides of the field. We also saw that with Coy Parrish when he was here at the University of Minnesota as well, too. But what would you tell an individual that's being asked to play a different position than what they've normally played, whether that be in high school, college, or even the NFL? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, you be a football player. If you asked to change a position, go to be the best you can at it because it's only going to help you as an athlete and as a football player. I think with me being able to do all the things that I could do, the only reason that happened is because I met the challenge when I was asked to move. Because my father used to tell me, I'd call home and say, Dad, they moving me. He says, Chuck, all right, here's what I'm going to tell you. Go be the best at it and don't call me no damn more. Because he knew my makeup, but that was my father, he telling me basically that I'm no matter what, I had to believe in how good of an athlete I was. And you got to believe in yourself and just meet the challenge. and good things are happening. Because I think a great football player is a guy is a multi-purpose player that's able to move around and do the different things. Now everybody's so one-dimensional. Mm-hmm. They play running back, but how do you know you ain't gonna be a great defensive back if you haven't tried it?
Right.
Or why if you're gonna be a defensive back and they say come make run this, how you gonna know if you don't try it? But everybody just plays one position, and I'm talking about as you're developing though. I think you should be challenged to play different positions because it'll make you a better player. And now when you get to the upper level, there's some guys that can play both ways, but when you get to the pros, you pretty much settled into
you focus on
what you're going to be doing. But until you get there, why not try everything?
Now, perseverance, both on and off the field. We've talked about that, and I think our viewers can see that too. That you've had to do that throughout high school, college, into the NFL. Looking back, what makes you the proudest of your career? Maybe it doesn't have to be as a Viking, but just what makes you the proudest of your football career?
I don't know. I think everything has a purpose. I'm not saying, sometimes you make mistakes, and I don't know. I think for me, I think when you look in the mirror and you look at yourself, and you look at the good things and the negative things and the mistakes and things like that, and if you can come and look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, boy, I made those choices, and no, this is my fault. And how are you going to get out of it and get to that place where you need to be? And for me, it was like, all right, I'm taking control again. I'm not going to be letting somebody make decisions for me, or I'm not going to take a path, even though I know what's down there, and say, "Oh, it won't happen to me," because you take, like when I talk like this, you're gonna make that decision. Well, I've been down there. This is what's down. You don't want to do that. Well, you see, I've done that before. I made my father, mother, hey, Chucky, you don't want to do that. No, that ain't going to happen to me. But, when people tell you what's down that path, you better listen. And then when you look in that mirror and you look at yourself, you got to say, wow, this is all on me because I'm too smart to make these stupid decisions. And so when I came to that realization, or when I accepted that, and got back to who Chuck Foreman really is and what he does, I've been in a good, even, special place. And so that's where I'm at. So I'm very blessed to have some people that I know that are around me that I know care about me. And I'm not concerned about what other people think of me or anything like that, because I know who I am 100%. And so some people may not like where I'm at, but man, don't ask me if you don't want to know my truth.
So, it's a special opportunity that you had this year. You talked about, looking back, what makes you the proudest, perseverance, right. Talking about this year you had the opportunity to kind of be there at moments with the University of Miami, right, and their championship run. Right. Did you have an opportunity to talk to some of the players, the team, and address them? Or
well, didn't have I got to go down there and be at the practices, sure, and stuff like that. Of course, I couldn't get to the championship game because I had that surgery. But I get text messages from Mario, congratulating me on, whatever, mm-hmm, and like I got, I communicate that way, and I'm sure he's busy with everybody, and he's got people helping him. But the bottom line is, I'm a big you. The you is me. and to see where they were when he got there and where he's taking them right now and all the obstacles that they have. You know, when you coaching at the University of Miami, you got to remember one thing. You got a lot of challenges, and a lot of people come to Miami, but they ain't coming for football. They coming to go to South Beach. They coming to go have a good time and all the different things. You go to Miami now, you look at downtown, it's like it's humongous. You know what I mean? It's so much there in Miami. So there's a lot of challenges to recruit Miami, but Miami is a whole different thing. Once you get there and you experience that Miami vibe, that whole Miami thing, as far as a player goes, and the way the university has grown and has improved in every aspect, whether it's facilities or the coaching and things like that. And Mario's doing a great job down, and all his assistants and everybody else down there. They're doing a great job. And just to see it continue to grow, because, you know, they tried to give us the death penalty because those boys, you know, when they were, you know, Howard Snellenberger and those coaches like that, they could go into Liberty City or Overtown and all these little tough places where, let's face it, most white people wouldn't want to go to recruit. And those guys were able to go in there and recruit and get this program to where it is and where it's growing. And this had a few years where they were kind of like, well, everybody else is coming in to get all the players that Miami would normally get. But so now they're back to where they need to be. I think they got the best coach for this time. He's the right coach at the right time at the right school, because we're about to turn it on. And so
so what I'm hearing is the U is back.
Well, the U is here. The U is here. We don't like to say it's back, but I think Mario Cristobal has done a great job, and I'm glad to, get a text from him and just to be aware of my whole, like, happy birthday and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's I like where it is, and it's a great university. And if anybody's out there that's listening, you good, you better go to the U.
No, Minnesota. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that one.
No, that's all right. All right, so you're a weekly headline contributor on the Jim Bob Sports Jamboree. So Jim Rich, Bob Sansevier, and Mike Superstar, Mike Morris on there. So when can listeners typically tune in to hear you when you're a guest on that?
Okay, well, we record on Wednesdays, like today.
Sure.
And then on the weekends, we were on stations all through Minnesota. So, and it comes on, I think some of them on Saturday. I know a lot of people listen to us in the morning. The only thing is we come on real early, like 6 or 7 in the morning. But tune in there, and we have Bob Sansevier, of course, and Jim Rich, and Mike Morris, myself, and, it has some great conversations about every sport. So I think they ought to tune in.
Well, Chuck, I want to thank you for sharing not just your football story, but also your life story with us. For Vikings fans or University of Miami fans out there, I mean, your legacy matters, and it matters to myself.
Right.
Of course, my dad. My dad's cheering you on as his favorite player, but.
Right.
It just, I talked about that challenge to those fans, make sure you get the word out to where, especially those writers are hearing, how important Chuck Foreman is, not only to the game back in the 70s, but even now, and the impact you're having.
Well, I can only say that it was a joy and thrill to be a part of the Minnesota Viking history, doing the things that we've done. And again, they're all appreciated, you know what I mean? It really is. And so who knows, maybe one day it'll happen.
And I think
I just want to be able to appreciate it. I don't want to be one of those guys that, I don't know, they celebrate you when you're gone.
I hear what you're
saying.
What
I'm saying?
Yeah,
right.
And then kind of like in the video, you didn't know what you had until he wasn't there anymore.
Exactly.
And I would hate for that to happen as well too. We looked at the stats. I mean, the stats are there. They talked about the fantasy football deal. I run a fantasy football podcast and website. You're the guy that, you know, everyone's trying to take in your first round of the fantasy football draft back in that time, if there were fantasy football. You know, your stats are there. You should be in. So let's help get Chuck Foreman there. All right. So huge shout out again to Skull Marketing for allowing me to be in these fabulous studios in downtown Hopkins, Minnesota. This has been wonderful to be able to use the equipment that's here and obviously sit down in person with you, Chuck. This has been amazing. But thanks, Ben and Hunter, for helping to line this up. Definitely appreciate it. And if you're not already following us, please make sure that you're following Vikings Playbook on X, and then it's at Vikes Playbook on YouTube, which this will actually be one of those videos that we're also sharing on, I said I write for purpleptsd.com. We'll also have it available there. So make sure that you're tuning in. We're also, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok also. So again, Chuck, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. This has been a memorable one, not just for myself, but hopefully for our viewers. And my dad's going to be really jealous that I get to meet you in person.
Well, you know, who knows? Maybe I'll be out in your territory. Who knows?
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for the Vikings Playbook Podcast. This is Steve Hoikkala. Again, your Sunday starts here, and you just got to witness an amazing story with Chuck Foreman. So tune in again every Saturday at 9 p.m. Central Time for every episode. Make sure that you're subscribing and setting your alerts. Until next time, Skol Vikings.